side now. We're growing very fast. And so the point of us is that since March, we are working at home, as most of the people. And normally we are working in our amazing office. We have like amazing office with 2 floors. It has all kind of crazy, freaky stuff from the 80s. And we have, well, it's like Google. It's like Google, but our office is like Google. But since March, we're working at home. And in the first place, it was like, we had to get used to it. Even though we have Laycos, the people wasn't used to it. So it was a little bit, well, difficult in the beginning. But thanks to Laycos, and I will just explain a small part of Laycos, we could work amazing from home and without any problem. So what I wanted to tell is Laycos is a platform. It's a platform. It's an app that you can open in your computer or in your mobile phone or your tablet. And once you open it, you have all your things there. So it's like you have a dashboard, and then you have all the things like your email, chat, video conference, your telephone. It's like even if you're in the office, I'm now at home, but I'm calling a client, and it seems that I'm in the office. We have all the people, everything, video conference. So it's so easy to work with them with one application. So you always know where the things are. You never lose nothing. And well, that's like us. So we're growing very fast. And I live in Canary Islands. My mother is from the Canary Islands, but my father and I was born in the Netherlands. So that's why I speak a little bit. I speak a little bit German because my grandma is German and my father is Dutch. So my mother is Spanish and my great grandma was from Austria. So I'm like the biggest mix of all. So let's start with the panel. So nice to meet you all. We have like a 25-minute panel. And the first panel is starting to talk to state of remote work in Spain. Now this is with Eva, Tami, Sara, and Pilar. So I don't know if they can hear me and if they wanted to begin with the 25 minutes. We have like a question round here so they can answer the questions. So the first question, if we want to start, the first question is, what is the percentage of the workforce that is allowed to work remotely in Spain? So this is for you guys.
Well, currently,
100%.
Currently between 30 and 40%. So I guess that's the maximum of the workforce that can telework. Really, there have been some studies to know how many people could telework in Spain, and the data were around 30-something%, and that's exactly the number we are teleworking in Spain right now. So that's the maximum. Before that, it was less than 9%. Just and not full-time telework, but once a week maybe or something like that. So it's like 4 times more in just a question of from Wednesday to from Friday to Monday. That changed to 10% to 40%. So that's
I think it's more the culture, you know. It's they aren't used to work from home, so that's the problem. But now they have to work, so it's they have to change. They have to change 100%. So next question: Does it vary? Does it vary between established companies and startups? Vary. Does it vary between stabilized companies and startups?
I don't have any numbers. I don't know if Eva maybe has some numbers about this, but I don't think there's a lot of variation around that. Probably maybe a little bit of startups are more inclined to do it, but I think it's mostly driven by role. Probably that's my inclination to think about it.
Well, I have the numbers. Just I don't want to be the one to talk. But if you want some numbers, I will give you some numbers. Yes, there's a huge difference. Not now that everybody who can telework is teleworking, but right before coronavirus, it was astonishing. It was around 8% in Spain of people who did some telework with established companies. And I don't remember the number exactly, but it was over 25% when we were looking at self-employed. So the number was very different.
It's very different.
Yeah. So people, that was I found it was I didn't like it at all, because that shows that people can telework, people can manage their own business from wherever, but they were not allowed to do it from the established company. So exactly. But I think that's changing, and that we can talk about that later if you want. That's going to change like this.
Well, the third question is: do you think it's about the culture, the cultural barriers? So it's about it's Spain the problem?
I think if we pick Eva's point that around 30 to 40% of the population can work remotely, I think in a recent conversation with Eva, she was saying there's so many industries that cannot do their job remotely. So if already the maximum number is 30 to 40%, I think also that creates a culture of we need to work in the place where we are. And to then start to change that, if you can, means that maybe your neighbor who can't, because of the kind of work they do, is going to look at you differently. So I think that I never thought of that, actually, that there are less jobs than in other countries which have more of a knowledge worker population. So of course it has to affect. But
there's something very important here that I was surprised, but because now with coronavirus, people have been crunching the numbers. And if we compare the same study in Spain and the US, the maximum of people they thought could telework or work remotely in the US wasn't much above 40%.
Okay.
So 30-something% in Spain is not that bad, taking into account the relevance of our hospitality industry, etc., etc. So that can change a lot depending on the place. Cities, maybe more over 50% can telework, but that's not so in rural areas or places devoted to other types of industries. So it's not that bad, let's say. Or maybe we think more people can telework than it's really possible, because 40-something% in the States maybe sounds low, doesn't it? But if you think about the economy and the structure, the industrial structure of the economy, makes quite sense. Knowledge economy is not that big after all, because people have to eat, people need services done on them, with them, and that cannot be done remotely.
Could it be that maybe they think that the talent in Spain isn't correct, or maybe more North Europe, they're more prepared to work remotely?
I'm going to just jump in here. This is Tammy. Hi, hopefully everyone can hear me. So I don't want to speak for all of Spain, but I will say that remote work has been growing really fast in the US, and I think that the pace with which remote work has been growing in Spain has been slower. And so I don't think that it's that Spain is going to continue at the slow rate that it was before COVID. I think this is definitely the event that is going to be the catalyst to drive more change. But there's just more catching up to do, because historically, Spain in general just hasn't been as receptive to remote work as certain pockets of the US. And also that's a great generalization as well, because there are plenty of pockets in the US that have also not been receptive to remote work. And I'm thinking primarily right now of government contracting, which is very, very conservative and traditionalist in its methods. And right now, because of COVID, we're seeing many more government contracting firms being more receptive to remote work, even though they're very behind. And so I think that if you look at Spain in that context, I definitely think that things will be changing. And this COVID, while a terrible experience, has been that event that can open people's eyes to different ways of working.
Exactly. Okay.
I think
and somebody
also
more.
culturally, culturally, I think we are also more social than maybe other countries in Europe. So more social in the sense of like wanting to see someone close, like even touchy, you know, and I think that is something that also makes a difference in that culture of maybe not wanting to see someone across the screen, but just having someone really close by physically. And I think that that can definitely impact a lot of this. And another part that also impacts this a lot is probably the leadership style that we have. I think someone mentioned it on the chat. I think there's a lot of promoting friends and family. And so there are a lot of people promoted in a lot of companies that are more inclined to micromanage. At least I've seen much more micromanaging here in Spain than, you know, abroad in companies that I've worked at. And I think that also makes kind of sense to kind of like have that person close by. And the digital tradition, I think it's huge as well. I mean, paying by card here in Spain, it's quite recent. I lived in the Netherlands, right? And Tamara, you can say about this, but you can pay anything by card in the Netherlands for like the past 20 years or so easily.
Yeah.
And here in Spain, you always had like some sort of limitation. You need to pay at least 50 euros to like be able to like pay by card, or, you know, 15. And I think that makes a huge difference as well. That digital scare, I think, you know.
Exactly. It's exactly like this is the scare. Even though the people like to see people, it's not like in the Netherlands. It's always cold. Well, not always, but the most of the time it's cold, and they're used to stay at home and not to socialize so many. So it's that's totally true. Okay. Well, second question. Startups in Spain within the remote work industry. And can any of you name some? Somebody?
I thought
Nope.
that was an excellent, challenging
Oh,
question.
really?
And when I was preparing for this, I was doing some research and I was like, I know that there has to be some companies, and maybe it's just that by nature of remote work, we're just not certain of the origin or the location of the headquarters of a company. You know, I know that Nacho is very tied to Theme, which is a developer and design company that is based in the Canary Islands, but they have, you know, it's remote friendly. But when I was trying to think and do research of companies that are in this space that are very, you know, that heavily promote or talk about their remoteness in Spain, I couldn't think of any. But now that I'm talking out loud, Typeform is in Barcelona, right? I think they're based in Barcelona, but I actually am not sure about their remote friendliness. But I'm just putting it out there that maybe that's a company. I don't know. Does anyone have any kind of information to back that up?
I do know that Travel Perk is very anti-remote. Actually, I went to a meetup and they said that they will not allow anyone to be remote. This is before COVID, so I don't know if they've changed.
Okay, so no to Typeform. All right. Well, that was my one shot in the dark.
Okay.
I don't have a.
I just saw also Jeff. I think that the company Jeff is also they want to remote. I don't know. It's only for the COVID, but I know people working there, and they're working like remotely before the COVID. So it's one of those.
Can I say something about that? I can't give any examples of startups, but I think what's really interesting is that we don't know. Because if you look at the either American or Anglo-speaking startups, they are putting out there all their stuff in English. They are shouting about everything they do. I bet there's lots of Spanish startups that are putting out all their stuff in English. And I wonder also whether moving forwards, if you speak English, you can educate yourself around how to work quite easily now. However, not everyone in Spain speaks English. Not everyone has access to all that information. And I just wonder, maybe a question for Eva or for the other panelists, do you think there is enough material out there so that people can actually self-educate without waiting for their companies to give them the go-ahead or to support them to be out there? Is there something around language also?
There's absolutely.
I have a comment, please.
a dearth of resources in languages outside of English. That's absolutely something that is a common issue with job seekers that we've talked to, as well as companies. And even with our training programs that we're developing, we're looking at possibly localizing some of our programs to different languages. But even with that, it's very challenging because you have to think about the market that could potentially want that. And the market right now is in English because most remote companies, if they are global, I mean, I think that there are plenty of remote companies that are more regional or country specific, but if they're global, their lingua franca is English. And so it's challenging because for companies like ours that are creating those resources, we aren't necessarily jumping at the chance to localize everything because it's not a good business decision because the market isn't there. But it's still helpful for people who need it. And so, but in all the research that we've been doing about localizing our courses, there's not enough resources in other languages besides English. I think Spanish is definitely the next one, after English, just by nature of the number of people that speak it. But there's definitely a lack of those localized resources.
Okay. Well, then the next question: what is the current legalization in Spain regarding remote work?
It's a disaster. So yes, there's in Europe, there's a European framework regarding, which is not a law, it's a framework, like some ideas about how what laws about remote work should be. And it's quite old, it has many years. But in Spain, we only have one article in one important law about remote work. And it's one of the briefest articles in that law. It only says that remote work is possible and that remote workers won't be, what's the word? Discriminados. Help me, please.
Discriminated.
Easy. And that's the only thing we have. So we don't have anything. There are some agreements at the level of company or industry, but very, very, very few. So, and they are not well known, so they are not used as example for other companies or other industries. So I think now there's some work being done regarding writing a law about telework, but until now we don't have anything. We only have one article that doesn't help at all. So we have other ideas. For example, we have since not long ago, the right to digital disconnection, which is very important and is related to remote work, but it's not exactly the same. So we really don't have anything. And that's how things are going. Companies don't know what to do. Workers don't know what rights do they have, because in fact they don't have any right according to the law, except not being discriminated, which is quite important, but it's not enough. So we don't have anything.
I'm curious about that because we're doing research right now on how different companies of different sizes and different backgrounds and in different industries are preparing people for remote work. And I've talked to a couple of people in Spain. So I haven't talked to anyone that worked for a very specifically only Spanish company. They were, part of a company that was based in another country, but they were in Spain. But they were saying that they were waiting for guidance. They're waiting for guidance as opposed to creating a policy of their own. And I thought that was really interesting. I am definitely more familiar with the landscape in the US, but when we talk with companies in the US, that language really changes, and it's not ever like the government will set the standard and all follow suit. It seems to be a little bit of the reverse, which is we'll create these standards and fit that into what the government is doing if they end up making any kind of policy changes. But I just find that really interesting, and I'm wondering if anyone else on the panel has any other experience or could expound on that a little bit in terms of companies needing the government to step in before taking the initiative to create a more in-depth remote work policy.
It's probably cultural, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we are really used to have the government back us up in whatever we do and kind of like wait for that. So I think it's more cultural and like a traditional sort of way of thinking than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something clear is that if you don't do anything, you won't get into trouble regarding
Absolutely.
remote work.
Yeah.
So that maybe, I must say, you were talking about the leadership style and culture, etc. It has absolutely everything to do with this you're saying. And I'm very sorry to say that I've looked at international reports about leadership quality in Spain, and it's not that good. So everything is related. We have very small companies, which all Europe has, but in Spain more so. And that is linked to, in general, lower leadership quality and being less progressive in terms of people policies. So all this mixes together and is translated into not trying. Just we're okay just as we are, so why change it? Maybe if I send employees home, I won't know what they are doing. Maybe they will ask for money to pay their computers, and I don't want to pay for that, etc. So they just avoid the trouble.
Can I go back to legislation? Sorry, because I've just remembered I worked with a company a couple of years ago, helping them set up a pilot. And they were connected to government, and they were really doing everything by the book. So they had all these surveys where people to work at home, they had to fill in the survey about their work location, whether they had a draft and everything. So some companies are doing it, and some companies know where to get that information. So the legislation is somewhere. So I suppose there's no law. It isn't?
No. But what they do
guidance.
The guidance is not in the law. They just get information from elsewhere. Good practice, good sense.
I wonder whether then there's going on mentality and kind of going in your leadership way, not even about management, but real leadership, as in these pilots. I haven't seen anything about it. Nobody's sharing that information. No. So there's also that lack of, we're trying something, let's share it.
No, people don't share. No,
and that I think that's also a problem.
We have tried to have we have tried to have small meetings to talk about telework, and we have invited companies which we knew were establishing or trying to establish a remote work policy, and they just didn't want to come. They didn't want to share. They didn't felt safe sharing their information. I don't know exactly why. That was exactly what happened.
Okay, so the next question is, if there are people in Spain, they want to work remotely, but how do they start? Where can they find information? Like, is there a platform that they can find to work remotely, or I don't know, some information about this?
Yes, there are lots of job boards that are specific to remote work. Again, I am much more familiar with the landscape for US-based jobs. So many of those platforms, while they are open to remote work, you do have to be careful about the search terms that you use to make sure that working in Europe or working in Spain specifically would make you eligible for that job, because just because a job is remote doesn't mean it's open to all geographical locations. So perhaps some of the other panelists know of platforms that are specific to Spain, but I know that We Work Remotely is a job board that is really popular and has many different remote work opportunities. If there's anything that's specific to Spain, I'd love to hear about it.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's start with the questions of the audience. We have 5-minute questions, so let's see.
There's quite a few in the chat. Do we want to pick any of them up?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, I'd like to pick up Natalia's then.
Oh, okay.
I was waiting for you to
yeah, I know, but I'm with my mobile now. It's
I forgot.
small.
Yes. Okay, I think, was it
Yeah.
Natalia? She had something around leadership and self-leadership. It's gone now. Is it Natalia? Yeah, I think it was something around that. And oh, here we go. Nelly, it wasn't Natalia, sorry. When you talk about leadership, are you referring to management? And then they say another way I'm thinking about this as well is leadership of the individual, of the team as well. To work well remotely, you need to be able to self-manage a bit more than people who work in an office. I wonder if that's also about culture, that how much space companies are giving people to take the initiative and again go a little bit out of the norm. I wonder if there's something around there, panel.
Yeah, I think it's cultural, as you say. I think it's something related to that presentism of just being at work and how that relates to everything else, right? So self-managing, it's not something that we are used to do either. I think from school to university to work, we are used to someone telling us exactly what to do. So it's definitely cultural.
I'm curious if any of the other panelists have heard of the culture map by Erin Meyer. Have any of you read that? Pilar, you're saying yes. So for anyone that's interested in some of the cultural differences, I think that resource is really helpful. And even coming from, I'm from the US, but I lived in Spain for 5 years, and I was actually also born in the Netherlands, Tamara. So,
Okay.
so there's this Netherlands connection.
My husband's Dutch.
Okay. there's all these connections. So I consider myself really multicultural, right? And pretty open, but this resource was really helpful in helping me understand how to relate to other cultures and how the cultural understandings and cultural norms, they really come into play when they're in juxtaposition with something else that is not aligned with those norms. And so when we talk about remote work best practices or what we see generally in remote work and what we need, it was very helpful to understand some of the cultural challenges in adopting remote work with understanding those principles of the differences in culture. So the differences in communication, whether you're a low context or a high context culture, evaluating, leading, deciding, trusting, disagreeing, scheduling, and then persuading. There's all these elements that differ from culture to culture, and understanding how to drive change in a culture that's different to the one from where the change originated. It's really helpful to understand those components. So I'll actually just drop the URL in the chat if anybody else is interested in that.
Great, that's great. Let's see if there are other questions.
There's a question asking if remote workers, Spanish workers want to work remotely, and the answer is yes. Before coronavirus, I remember, I don't know the number exactly, but like around at least 30% wanted to work remotely. But now that they have tried, around 80% say that they like remote work. So yes, people want to work remotely, but they don't want to work remotely like we are doing it right now with children at the other side of the door and having to remote school them, etc. That's not remote work done properly. But yes, people want to work remotely normally with proper conditions.
Exactly. Even though they say they work better at home than at the office, because there's always like so many noise and distractions in the office, and they say that at home they're working much better and even more time. So it's like they can actually plan their time to finish all the work. So it's really, I think it's about more than 80% already. They tasted it. So, okay, well, let's start and then with the next panel. It's okay. And these are 25 minutes, and it's all about could Spain become remote worker? So in this panel is Carlos, Elsa, Aurora, and Rowena.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So guys, okay, you're all there. And let's see, the first question is, should Spain become a hub for remote workers?
Yes, I like this question, but I think that we have very good two examples here. For example, in Canary Island, we have Gran Canaria and Tenerife has a very good hubs to attract remote workers and digital nomads to here. But in Spain, we have some cities or some areas to attract digital nomads or remote workers too, like Barcelona, for example. If a very good hub to attract the remote work community. About all, but in Barcelona you have the startup hub too, no? The technological and the startup hub, and this is a good way to attract the remote companies, the talent, the digital talent, and the tech companies too. But here, for example, in Canary Island, I think we are more competitive with the weather. We have a really good weather all year. It's maybe similar to Lisbon in Portugal, no? For example, it's a light areas close to the beach. You can to practice sports, enjoy the beach very close, and you have a really good connection too. And I think yes, Spain is a really good hub for remote workers.
Okay. So next question, how can the different regions benefit from it? So how can they benefit of this?
I think it's down to your definition of paradise. So the question actually asks, can Spain be a remote worker's paradise? So Spain is my paradise at the moment because I moved from Ireland 3 years ago to here due to the necessary change needed from weather, and it was a life change needed due to having a daughter with chronic asthma, and thankfully she's much better in the climate here in Spain. But I'm actually in Zaragoza, not in Barcelona. And this is an unknown place in Spain. So it's interesting that you ask about regions, because it's not so much on the grid in terms of, it doesn't have the knowledge maybe that in terms of being a tourist destination that Barcelona, the Canaries, or these other places would have, the south. So the definition of paradise is interesting because that's what will help Spain market itself to these different types of remote workers. So I moved here permanently. Some people may want to come for 6 months to work and find it their paradise, like a digital nomad. Some other remote workers may want to take a family holiday here in one of the regions where they have all what they need, camps if they've got a family, they have the infrastructure they need, they have access to beaches, whatever it may be. So I think in terms of understanding that paradise, it'll be really good to also understand the personas that we're going to market to on behalf of all these regions in Spain.
Perfect. Okay, the next one. How can empty Spain benefit from remote workers? Let's see, somebody.
Hi, everyone. I will take this point because I went to Spain last year. I'm from Venezuela and I'm living now here in Colombia. And I totally loved Spain, and I got the opportunity to visit several small towns besides Barcelona and Madrid. And I think that small towns, we call it here in Spanish like ciudades dormitorio or ciudades satélite. I don't know if you are all aware of that term. They can have a great exponential growth and economical growth because people are usually attached to big cities to find jobs. And especially in the IT area, we have like, oh, I have to move to Barcelona to find a great job, or they are paying me more in Barcelona or in Madrid. And that's not necessarily true. I met a guy that lived in Girona and he was earning more money living there than in Madrid, because he's saved a lot of money in transport. The cost of life is cheaper. And I think that Spain as a country needs to improve that. You guys have an excellent country. I love it. I want to move there. And also it's very, how could I put it? The topography of the country allows different climate sectors, and that's very interesting for many people that's not living in Spain. For example, you have beaches, you have mountains, you have snow. And for me, for example, as a tourist, I will go for the cold weather. And that's something that Spain as a tourist policy can use to attract more digital nomads like me or my husband or any other person that wants to go there and say, hey, I got this plan for you. I got hotels specific for you. We have co-working spaces for you, and they can improve those economic plans. And that's my point of view. And I think empty Spain will not be longer empty. We need to improve that. And I think that it's like a social responsibility to do that. For example, I have here some facts that says 30% of the Spain territory holds 19% of the population, mainly big cities like Madrid, Barcelona, or Valencia. And then the other 10% is on the other 70% of Spain. It is all gathered in these big cities, and it doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Okay, so this is also go on.
Sorry, yeah, no, I just wanted to jump in because I wanted to add to what Aurora was saying. So basically, this has two sides from my point of view. Is the fact that we can actually move to, so we are also talking about traditional tourism here. Okay, so here the problem with Spain is that we have positioned our image as a tourism destination, right? So come to Spain for a week, for 2 weeks, you know, everything included, all this image we have about mass tourism. So I think it's related to that. So if we make the shift, which is now the moment to do that, I think there is no better, there hasn't been any better moment than now, is to position Spain as a place for remote workers, as we have been doing this for a few years in the Canary Islands, and I know other areas in Spain as well. And the point is that it not only helps us to diversify our huge dependence on mass tourism, but that also gives some opportunities to those areas in Spain, the empty Spain, as we call it, rural areas that we have seen. I've seen in the news a few towns in the north of Spain that are actually building these co-working spaces and trying to attract remote workers to come and live there. Why? Because of these more, you know, all the qualities that we know about the weather and so on of living in Spain, but it also, we want to have this type of tourists. I call them tourists because at the end of the day is a permanent tourism, and that's what we would like to see in Spain, or what I would like to see from my point of view. A type of tourism that actually stays, that contribute to the local economy, that want to, you know, get involved in local activities and community activities, and they also pay taxes, right? So I think that's the move we should see, and that Spain is one of the places to do that. Of course, I think we have all said some of the advantages that we have, and there are regions like the Canary Islands specifically that should take advantage of this, and that's what we are trying to do. However, if the image of Spain out there is another one, which is come to, you know, sand, beach, and all this stuff that we have been promoting for years, then we are not going to make this change.
Perfect. Okay. Well, the next question then. Let's see. What other successful programs around the world are targeting remote workers for their cities? So what can we learn from them?
Hi again. Well,
Hi.
I'm going to speak about Colombia because here the country have developed this initiative that is called teletrabajo.gov.co, and it's very well. And they have a structure like this legal frame for remote work, and I think it's great. I've been when I went to Spain last year. I was 3 months there, and all the things that you have mentioned before about there's no legal structure about it. Yeah, I know. And I'd compare Spain with Colombia here, and here the structure is great. I'm going to send to all of you the link. Oh, it is in Spanish, of course, but they have first of all given to the companies all the information so they can land to remote work in the most easy way. And besides that, Bogota and Medellin, that are the main cities here in Colombia, are supporting small cities here in Colombia so they can move out the remote operation of their companies so they can help grow those cities. And they're giving tax flexibility. They are promoting like these business plans for these companies. Like if you go and set up your company in Cali, for example, that's another city here, you are not going to pay taxes for the next 3 years. If you're going to move to Cúcuta, Norte de Santander, that's a border city, we're going to help you with financing your building structure. And that's a pretty way here in Colombia to impose this whole remote working initiative. I think they're doing it great. We're at Interfel, we're taking that into our company because we want to be part of it and we want to grow with that help that the government itself is providing to us as a startup and also as a citizen as well, because even though I'm a Venezuelan, they are giving us all the legal documentation to stay here, to work here, even though I'm not working for a Colombian company. We want to pay our taxes, our personal taxes, like a self-employed, and they are giving us that opportunity. And for us, it's a great step they are giving here in Colombia.
Can I just add to that, because you asked about a city? I can't answer you directly about a city, but I can tell you about Bali in Indonesia, where I have family living. And I see some of you nodding because the infrastructure there within the co-working, which I've luckily spent time in, it's really beautiful on some of the beaches in the south of Bali, but also all of the co-workings are quite well connected with each other. There's an association. And what you see happening there, and you cannot talk about visas and legislations and restrictions, because one of the hardest places in the world to stay in for more than 6 months is Bali, by the way. But people manage to do it by going in and out, by leaving the island and going to Singapore, for example, to renew their visa. And what they've managed to do is on that island is extend how long people are staying. People are not coming in for the few weeks or the 6 weeks. They're coming in for 3 months. They're sometimes coming in for 6 months, and they're using. So that's what I'm saying. If we take the focus away from just these full-time, paradise can be for 6 months, for a year, for a family break with 2 remote workers for a year, where they know they can go with their kids and get the services they need, these longer extended stays. And that's something that I believe we need, could be really good to look at the moment for Spain as an opportunity.
Okay, that's really nice. Let's see, somebody else wanted to reply on the question? Somebody more? Elisa? Elsa? Carlo?
Yeah, other examples, for example, here in Europe, we have the example of Estonia, no? It's very popular. The government took in action the e-residence program, no? And try to move e-people, no? The people really don't move to Estonia, but have the e-residence, and it's a good example. Maybe we can try to implement this for for get more flexibility for try to track remote workers. But in my opinion, here in Spain, about all in Spain, we have other advantage is that the people want to live. In my opinion, the people want to live here, maybe like Bali for 6 months, 3 months, or relocate a team here during the winter. For example, for startups in the northern of Europe, work here and enjoy the life here better than them for the weather. And this is a natural advantage. Other countries can't compete with this natural advantage. We have big cities too. We have a startup ecosystem in Spain. We have a good connection too, inclusive in the rural areas or in the small cities like I don't know, Malaga, Sevilla, Alicante, Zaragoza, Tenerife, Gran Canaria, La Coruña. We have some cities, the medium cities, between 300,000 people to, I don't know, maybe 700,000 people, and the life there is cheaper, more cheaper than in Madrid, Barcelona, Berlin, London, and it's a good places for work, for remote work, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may add, sorry, Tamara. I keep interrupting you. But I think with everything everybody has said now, one thing we are missing in Spain is that kind of incentives. So those that they were mentioning about Colombia, and I don't know if anyone mentioned Tulsa Remote, the example of Tulsa. So they provide incentives for people to come and live there, right? So they give them cash to start at the beginning, or they give some kind of tax incentives and so on. And I feel like in Spain, we don't have that kind of package, let's say, and that's something that we should implement. Also, we have to think about a way, so this could also incentivize our diaspora to come back. Let's not forget that a lot of people, great talent, Spanish talent is out there in different countries, and because they have no opportunities in Spain. So remote work can give opportunities to those type of people to come back and stay in Spain, right? So we have a huge issue with brain drain. So that could be a great way to get these people back to Spain and stay here. So that's also what we're trying to do from the Canary Islands. But yeah, in terms of advantages, I think we have plenty that we should take advantage of.
Okay, well, the last question is, we as remote workers, what can we do to facilitate it? So what can we do?
I took a call the other day from an Irish friend based out of Dublin, and actually it was just after it was in end of March, and it was just after COVID had started, in terms of no one realized how bad things were going to be. But the conversation was, if I came to Spain for the summer, would you help me find, with my husband, we're both remote workers in Ireland, in Dublin, we want to get away, will you help me find infrastructure, campamentos, things for my children, accommodation? And I said, no problem, you just tell me, I will help you. Because she wanted to look for like a 3-4 month lease. That is how you can help individually. Everyone on this call, you have the local knowledge, a lot of us, and there is the challenge, but I think if you can help, like that was a family asking another family, and it's just one example of the way, because that one, what's really important about the remote work community is that one person, if I'd helped them, particularly because she's in HubSpot, to give away where she works, and they have lots of remote workers, the word will spread. So that's how I think you can help.
Yeah, exactly. We have to help the people. Okay, somebody want to comment this question?
I think it's also important, if we want to change this mindset and we want real change, we need, I mean, it's great, as Nacho said, we should have more afterworks, but I think it's time, and somebody else was saying this in the chat, it's time to really go and speak with the administration, with the government, with whoever we have, whoever. For example, some of us have those contacts within the government. So I think it's time to push and really provide numbers and say, look, these are the advantages we can get if we really come up with some kind of legislation, as they were saying, or some kind of incentive program. So kind of put together a proposal and really go and talk to the public administration and to the government. And each of us, I think we are all in this together. I feel we are all leading by example, right? So we are actually doing it. We're working remotely. We're showing the benefits, and we're trying to make this work. So, I mean, it's also up to us to push as much as we can and do it in community, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
In comment of this, only for finish, I think that we have two ways. No, it's commented this in the chat. We have the self-employed or the freelancers is one way. Now, if you move to work remotely in Spain as a freelancer and you need to put in action the business here, pay taxes here, is maybe a hard way if you compare with other countries as England or France or Germany. But this is one of the way. But you have other opportunities. For example, with the European Union countries, the people move here is the cities, is the European cities. You don't have visas, you don't have limited time here. It's different for people from Latin or United States or Asia or other countries. But I think that the natural tourist market from Spain is Europe. No? It's the best market about all the northern countries and these kind of things. And this is a good opportunity for, say, in the same line with Elsa, we are a very good destination for the traditional tourists, but now we can do more for the remote work tourists, not the new type of tourists here to attract the remote workers.
Yeah, I think to point out what Carlos is just saying, I think as the way I see it, Spain and especially Barcelona are the front door to remote work and for the rest of Europe. I think the best things that the country has is first of all, the diversity of culture, and also the fact that you can also speak English and Spanish. Both for many people can be a plus. And it is more the fact that the culture barrier in Spain, it's a little bit lower than the other European countries. That could be very helpful for companies that trying to land, or better said that, they are trying to build multicultural team. It's better in Spain that doing in other countries. For example, in our case, we have our team is built with Americans, Spain. We have one from Germany, Latin Americans, and we found easier to work with Spain than with other European cities. And I think that's a plus. Spain need to explode a lot to get to the point that we are aiming to.
Okay, perfect. Well, now let's take some questions of the chat. Maybe you can find some questions, Carlos, Elsa, Aurora, and Rowena.
I also, sorry, Tamara, I added the questions too in our agenda, so then we have all the questions in one place, so we don't have to scroll. So could be helpful there.
Yeah, so you can help me with this because I have the mobile.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in, Tamara, as you are on the cell phone. So Miguel Farias asks, traditional remote work is generally associated with technical roles. Do you see these evolving in the future? Was this from this panel? Yes, correct. Anyone wants to jump in?
I think that is not only for techies. I think it's many jobs today, journalists, I don't know, medical, during the COVID-19 is using a lot for medical consultants, or I don't know, marketing, designers, illustrator, artists, musicians. The remote work is, if you have the possibility to do the digitalization of your company or of your business, you can do the remote work. It's not a problem for technical. Obviously, the techies have, I think that now have more advantage than the other people that have more, I don't know, what do you say this, more traditions in this work, in this world, sorry. But for me, it's open, and in the future, it's open for all.
More and more examples are appearing. So Ava, like me, we're both lecturers. We will both deliver completely online. Ava's fully remote. I teach students all over, back to Dublin, all over the world. So there's more and more examples other than techies. I've just put into chat, I also work with a consulting company out of Portugal, based across Portugal and Spain mainly, who are all social sector consultants working on large charitable projects. There's 60 plus of them, all remote. Okay, I couldn't put them in for the Spanish base because they're based out of Portugal, their address is out of Portugal. So Portugal took that one from us, right? But that's another example. There's a veterinary company out of Barkin, out of Portugal, where the vets are all remote online. I know some manufacturing roles you can't, but there is lots and lots of examples of it extending, of it moving into support roles, of it moving into areas that you maybe wouldn't think of. So I do believe it's moving outside of tech.
Awesome. Thank you, Rowena. I'm going to squeeze in the tricky question that I don't know who asked, and I'm going to throw this question to Elsa. So why are the Canary Islands the best place to work remotely from? This is the 2 minutes of advertisement here.
Okay. Well, I think some of the advantages that we have mentioned already, but just to summarize, I think it's the excellent climate, right? So we have excellent weather all year round. Not many places in the world can say this. We have natural environment. So there are 8 islands, and each island is completely different from each other. So you can actually explore quite a lot. The security, it's a safe place. We are also under the European regulations, so everything it's regulated. The low cost of living comparing to other parts in the world, in Europe specifically. The highest speed internet, even when we are in the middle of the Atlantic, we still have fiber. And also, I think one of the main for companies and also remote workers who want to have their own businesses are fiscal advantages. Depending on the sector and the type of business, you can find different fiscal advantages here. So I think those are the main ones. I don't know, Nacho, if you want to add anything else.
I could talk for hours, but I'm not going to take advantage of this. So why don't we talk about rural areas? What's happening with España Vacía? Because I think the value of Spain is actually the diversity and the beauty of all the regions around Spain. And as somebody mentioned before, I think that not everyone likes the sun and beach. I mean, there's people that love cold weather and mountains. So anyone wants to add some thoughts on it?
It's just interesting because this picks up on Elsa Aurora's point earlier about the incentives, because I spoke to a friend in Bielsa in near Huesca, near the French, it's actually near the French border, but it's in Spain, and they were interested in the co-living, co-working model in that area, but they don't have the bandwidth in their they don't have the cabling. So coming from Ireland, where we had some issues in rural areas, I think there's also a proper plan needed that for the rural areas, there is that infrastructure, that technical access there. And I'm not saying, I know there's depopulation, for example, in parts of the Zaragoza province, which could potentially have fine technical access. But yeah, I think there could be an issue there in terms of rural connectivity. And then after that, so I don't know if anyone else has any comments on that, but I know that that is an issue in the Huesca province.
Yeah, I think that now a lot of regions or areas like Catalonia, here in Canary Island, in Galicia, start this movement. Maybe in Aragon, Huesca, or part of this this part of the country is like this movement. For me, we have some advantage and some problems. The problems normally is the connection. The internet connection is the one of the best problem. Probably the second problem is in the same time a problem and advantage is there don't live a lot of people. No, it's all this community and live all those persons there, but you have the opportunity to try to attract young people together. If you put young people there, you put co-working space, you put the good or normal internet connection. I never visit Bali, but some friends go to Bali, and in Bali the internet connection is not really good. It's a normal connection, no, but it's a paradise for surfing and these kind of things. But in the mountains, maybe it's a paradise too. If you have a good internet connection, or an excellent internet connection, but good internet connection, co-working space, and a good atmosphere, rural areas, and maybe a good life there, and it's cheaper than the big city. It's a good combination for this. I think that we need, in Spanish we have a phrase, no? This, what is first? El huevo or la gallina, no? I don't know if it's translated in English. I don't know. Maybe we need to put there first co-working space, some businesses, or put first, like a Tulsa movement, no? Try to attract the people with money or houses, or I don't know, and start to put in action this. But it's a very good opportunity.
Well, I'm gonna. Sorry, go ahead.
No. If you want to change topics, it's fine. I just wanted to add, but it's fine. Go ahead.
One more. You can finish up.
Okay. No, I just wanted to add that what Rowena was saying. These examples I've heard in the north of Spain, they are definitely having issues with the connection. So what I've heard is that some of the local ayuntamientos, the mayor, they are getting money specifically to rebuild some of the buildings and convert them in co-working spaces where they will have fiber. So that way they want to attract this kind of profiles. But the other thing I wanted to touch base on is what Naili was saying here. So in Spain, it's true, everything is about connections. But we have to take into account that these kind of people that we can attract to empty Spain, for example, and the way Tulsa has done it is people who are actually working for other companies. They could be working for companies abroad in Europe or in the US, but they are living in empty Spain. But you have to give them some kind of incentive. Otherwise, why are they gonna go there? So I think it's not, yes, we work based in connections if you want to work with the Spanish companies, but for these kind of programs, we need to build those incentives. It's not only the connection, but how do you bring them there, right? Why are they gonna go there?
I think that actually nowadays there's even more incentives to move to rural areas, and I'm going to put my example, which is not very good because I'm not living in a rural area yet. But actually, I moved to a house where now I'm growing carrots, lemons, papayas in my own garden, and for me this was a lifesaver. Obviously, I moved to a bigger place because I have a 6-year-old son that if he had to stay in my flat during these last 12 weeks, I would have gone crazy. And I've been having these hobbies which I never thought that I was gonna have, and I could see a lot of families if they have the possibility now to work remotely and they don't have issues with the connections, perfectly moving to rural areas which are beautiful. The quality of life is amazing. Kids grow healthy, eating great food. So this could be a movement that could certainly be utilized. Obviously, I think that there needs to be some initiatives implemented in that regard, and it could have solved a huge problem that we are suffering in Spain and in many other places, right?
Yeah.
Cool. We are already past the time. Supposedly, right now we were supposed to jump into networking, but I feel that we can open the conversation to everyone who wants to participate, and we'll give it another 10-15 minutes, and if we feel then we can move on to the networking side. And I wanted to just state a thought that I thought was super interesting, connecting both panels, right? In every event that we had so far, particularly when we were talking about the state of remote work in each country, we came out with very interesting conclusions about what were some of the triggers to remote work. And some of them were cultural, and some of them were the industries. And today, one of the things that I never thought about, and it makes perfect sense, is something that I think that Eva mentioned before, is that in Spain we are mostly a service country, a service economy, right? And the knowledge economy, I don't know if you have numbers that you can share about what the knowledge economy represents in Spain, but
it's low.
But it's low, right?
It's low.
It's still very low, and this is certainly connected to the feasibility of remote work. So I was also great to hear some of those numbers you shared about the maximum that we can allow in Spain. It's like around 40% of the workforce being able to work at least part-time remotely. So certainly this is something that we need to work on if we really need to make a change. And actually, the current tourism model is under a big question mark, and this means in the Canary Islands, for example, 35% of the gross domestic product, which is huge. So if we need to reinvent tourism, one of the things we need to do is to switch to a bigger knowledge economy more than a service economy, even if it's connected to tourism, like digital nomads and co-livings and all these segments is connected to it. So I just wanted to share that thought, because for me it was one of the take-homes from today. But I would love to open the conversation to anyone who wants to participate from the panels or from the audience. Big silence now. Don't be shy. Any thoughts, Eva, on this?
Well, I was thinking because my mind is spinning around an idea. I think Natalia has left, and she had a very interesting idea regarding there's so many people unemployed in Spain, and they could be remote workers for other countries from Spain, and that's not being explored. I'm sure that's not being explored. Many people in Spain have degrees that they are not using. And people, as you know, in Spain like to live close to where they were born. And it's difficult for people in Spain to move abroad, etc. So that would be a way of increasing the amount of remote work in Spain, I'm sure. And people in Europe would find very, very well-prepared people in Spain, because I think that the number of educated people has been growing immensely in the last decades. Digital literacy for these people is very good. Not so much for older people, but yes, it's very good for younger people. So Fabrizia says that she's trying to do that. I find that very, very interesting. That's something that I think it's not being exploited in Spain.
For example, sorry.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, I only say, for example, we started some years ago a small program with the university, in my case here, in the University of La Laguna in Tenerife, and with XIII in Nomad City and in the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, to try to convince the students, the degrees, to the remote work exists, and you have the possibility to live here, for example, in Canary Island, and work for a company in Spanish mainland, or for example, if your barrier is the language, here in Spain is a barrier, but it's a very, very easy broke barrier. But you only need to learn English. But if this is the most difficult barrier, it's very easy to broke. No, other barriers is worse than this. But start these programs and try to convince the students to say you have more ways and more possibilities to work for a company here or to work for the state, for the government. In my opinion, in Spain, we have a really bad problem, but a lot of people want to be, a funcionario, no? Work for the government, the local government, the regional government, or the national government, not or a company. But if you convince the people for this and trying to work, I think that after of coronavirus, maybe some startups, some companies try to put in action remote friendly. I don't know if 100% remote, but maybe remote friendly, and maybe it's a good opportunity for get a jobs in these companies now, and try to combine and do these students the soft skills is more important for start to work for these companies, and maybe it's a good time for start this. And
I would go. Sorry, Carlos.
And the probably spam moment is in Escuela de Trabajo Remoto, we are promoting this and try to combine enterprise and institutions to do this way.
I wonder if we need to go even one step before that also to schools. And this is, of course, an issue not just from Spain, but when you get to 16, 17, 18, and you're starting to think about what you're going to do next, even if you're going to don't go down the traditional route of university and stuff, what shall I choose? What career shall I choose that is going to enable me to work in a way I want to? And just be aware of this, because this is another thing that unless it has to start early to get, this is about seeing the world of work as something completely different, not just location specific. So yeah. Good point.
Yeah, and also just to compare to Ireland, I don't believe it exists in the Spanish system, but we do something called a transition year when everyone is about 16, 17. And a lot of them do 6-month work placements. I did one when I was young. It's existed for a long time. And it's really interesting because a lot of those soft skills, I don't like to call them soft skills, power skills, are developed at that time because students at that very important age are sent out to work in a company. They either volunteer or they work in a company. They often have to do presenting, debating, all that kind of thing, because that's one of the things I've really noticed. It's not just about the language skills in Spain, that some young people I've encountered, their confidence levels, even though they're lovely one-on-one, in groups, they're very nervous. And that has a huge issue longer term. And I'm comparing Ireland to Spain, sorry. So I want to give you a solution, and Nacho and I have mentioned this a few times to each other. There is programs in Ireland as sorry, there's one in Portugal as well. Sorry, it's in Portugal. I'm really sorry, but it's a remote work training program with mentors as well. So there's mentors and buddies that work. So one of the things that's really important is that we don't try, and I know from teaching that someone isn't going to learn to present like this by doing a webinar. I have to be honest with you. They usually have to, I believe 99% of the time, they have to be able to stand up in front of a physical room of people as well. That's my personal opinion, because you build a confidence in person. So the mentors can help to do that. There's examples of programs like that from Ireland. There's examples of programs in Portugal. I don't know, I have never heard of any in Spain, which is aiming for this younger profile, like Pilar is saying, either at the school age or young adult. So I believe that that would be really important.
Yeah, I totally agree, Rowena. And one of the things I wanted to share connected to that is that one of the things that I enjoyed seeing throughout this pandemic is the fact that my 6-year-old son is having lessons at Zoom with his schoolmates. And when I rewind, I'm like, what was I doing when I was 6 years old, right? So there's definitely in the younger generation is going to be the total, change with this, and because of the moments that we live in, because they're gonna assume that this is totally normal. Just building relationships, learning, teaching, etc. online is totally normal. But in our generations, we are further down the line, and we still have to go through that transition, right?
that's it. And then the other thing, just to say, as we all know, you lose, I mean, I'm waving my hands around to demonstrate it, you lose those visual cues in this type of communication. And even from a developmental perspective, young people need to have those other skills built first. Otherwise we might as well be robots, because we are humans at the end of the day and we need to connect. So
oops, anyone else wants to jump in from the participants? Any comments? Jaime, go ahead.
Yeah, what I would like to say is, you know, I'm fascinated by, first of all, meeting so much people that are in the same page. You know, as I always been, I have organized most of my career. Whenever I have been employed, you know, it has always been like a hard thing for me to go to the office, and I've been a promoter of remote things forever. But I think here in Spain, what we should do, I don't know, maybe it's a question, maybe it's a proposal, but I think we should definitely have to work and talk with government in order to promote some legislation that allows people to have, you know, easy access to, or can move here and maybe not pay that much taxes in order to promote, you know, Spain has a hub for remote workers. But also we should focus on what we can do as, you know, as private entities. So maybe, I don't know, creating companies that help people relocate here, or, you know, that take care of the contracts with the government and make it easy for people to come in and come out as easy as possible. You know, work as a buffer, as a, you know, some layer in between the hardships of the regulation and, you know, what we want to achieve, that is people coming here. And there's definitely, I think, money to be made there.
I totally agree, Jaime. There's huge opportunities nowadays. We've seen some of the companies that were already in the remote work industry boom, but completely boom over the last 12 weeks, and they're solving problems that could be solved in many parts of the world. Most of them are focused on the American market, because that's the one that was probably ahead of the game. But some of those ideas can be totally extrapolated to Spain and to Europe. Today I was talking to David Blay, which is one of the other popular voices in Spain, who has been for over 10 years talking about remote work, and he was telling me how you know, the companies connected to the desks for, you know, home offices were interested in this movement, because they can activate services for those who now are working at home, but they don't have a proper desk and a proper chair and a proper office setting at home, just because they never thought of it, and they are, you know, for 2 months, you know, using whatever bench they had available at home. So there's tons of opportunities. Definitely, I totally agree. The connection with the government is needed. One of the things that I like the most about this horrible situation that we lived over the last 12 weeks is that governments were forced to work remotely. So now we don't have to tell them what it is. Now they understand what it is, and they were enforced to implement solutions, you know, without preparation. And obviously, if they are just a bit smart, not only governments but also companies are going to implement at least emergency remote work, because this pandemic could come back. And if you are a company founder or owner, and you are like, well, maybe in December I'm going to be sent home again, I'm going to prepare myself for, you know, this situation in the future. And this is exactly the same for governments. If governments can, you know, get their work done in a future pandemic, I mean, again, we're going to have chaos, and that's what we already lived through over the last 12 weeks. So again, this horrible situation has been also very positive for many reasons for remote work, and there's huge opportunities that will be available in different markets to solve the problems that remote work has.
Regarding what you were saying, Nacho, I've been talking to many managers of private companies, but also public organizations recently, regarding the change in their work due to Corona and working remotely from home. And all of them, they are not a representative sample, they are very few, but in very different sectors, very different profiles, all of them have agreed that they think they should have more remote work after coronavirus is over. After coronavirus is over. They were people who didn't have any, most of them didn't have any formal policy, or they had just 1 day per week, most of remote work, so that which amounts to nothing changes really. But now they are saying at least 2 days, maybe 3 days, and the mindset is changing. So I am absolutely sure that things are going to change, because their minds have changed.
I agree. Awesome. Any other member wants to share their point of view? I think that we are a little bit over time, so we're gonna stick to this conversation for another 15 minutes and then close the event. Anyone wants to share their thoughts, ideas, comments, questions? Should we go grab a beer?
I just wanted to, so I agree with your points. I'm just concerned about the mentality of our public institutions. So yeah, I agree there will be companies and that will shift to remote work, maybe part-time remote work, and letting people have more flexibility. However, I'm listening to a lot of civil servants or people who work for the public administration, and they are like, oh, I'm so done with this remote work. I want to go to the office. I hate this. I don't stop working. And I'm afraid that they think about remote work, about working, they relate it to working from home, which is, I don't think any of us are at home 24/7 when we don't have a pandemic. I cannot work from home all the time. So that's what I'm thinking. People might not understand really what remote work is. So that's my only concern. And I think, again, this is a cultural thing, and there is a lot of work we need to do on the cultural part. I agree with some of the comments in the chat. Yes, it's also legal stuff that we need to work on, but this cultural thing, I think, is the main problem we have in Spain.
I was worried about a similar thing, that remote work as it's being done now from home, full-time, with children, etc., is not the best way to work and to be productive. So that it just lets people think, oh no, remote work is a disaster. We tried when Corona, and just forget it, it didn't work. But as I'm talking with more and more managers, I see this is not the case. They are seeing that work is being done, and they know people is suffering in some kind. But after this is over, they have changed their mindset really. I was very worried about the very similar thing you were saying, and I think it's not going to happen. It's not. People are working hard to get things done, and managers are seeing that, and they are changing what they think about remote work.
If I might say a couple of things real quick. I think that's kind of a good problem to have as well around the culture. Like, once people have the option to work from home, they can figure out if it was best for them, whether they're single or in families or fitted around school, and there'd be opportunities there as well for people like Rowena to help people figure out what the best way that they can work remotely. I completely agree as well. I'm Irish, if you can't tell, and I have a lot of Spanish friends in Dublin who just, like you mentioned the brain drain earlier, and I certainly think that having remote Spanish workers in Spain is something that for Spain to focus on. It doesn't affect me, but I would definitely agree with that point, just from seeing how many smart Spanish people are not in Spain. And then on a totally new topic, how many years out do we think, because this will become a bigger thing, like global taxation for remote workers, particularly those who keep traveling around? How will taxation work around the world? Because essentially it won't work until every single country in the world agrees to the same thing. Otherwise you'll have a loophole everywhere, or there'll always be a loophole somewhere until you get every last country. I see that as being it's coming quicker now because of this, but still like 10 years out at least. So
Kevin, you bring up
they could close all these.
You bring up a topic that blows my mind, which is exactly that, world taxation, and because obviously I've been hosting remote workers for the last 5 years in our co-living and co-working spaces, and that's something that always comes in the debate, right? I'm Irish, but I've been traveling the world for the last X years. Why should I pay taxes in Ireland or now in Spain that I'm here for 6 months? And obviously this is something that I think that the governments are not ready yet. But they first need to get their shit together to be friendly enough to start the discussion about creating a world tax. But it makes total sense because digitalization has changed the rules about how the countries establish taxes and what was the purpose of those taxes. I could be born in the Canary Islands, but if I'm living in Boston, well, maybe I should temporarily pay taxes in Boston because I'm using their roads, I'm using their security, I'm using their infrastructures, and these should be flexible enough to be adapted to a new lifestyle that we are enjoying nowadays. But I think that will be a great topic to debate on a remote work, Afterwork global. We can have inputs from the different perspectives, and thank you for bringing it, because I think it's definitely a challenge, and that it will come sooner or later in the conversation.
It's also interesting if you look at some of the leaders in remote work, as in the companies that have been trailblazers, and some of the names like Automatic, GitHub, GitLab, we know the names, that they've established their own models, and I'll share one in a minute, in terms of how they pay internationally and fairly. And a lot of them have publicly shared that. So it's interesting that we're waiting for global change, but some companies are saying we can be innovative and we can honorably pay people based on a model which is transparent. So I like what I'm trying to say to people, and also because comparing Ireland to Spain, Spanish bureaucracy, it's cultural, can be quite restrictive. And other governments' bureaucracy can be quite restrictive. So I just want to encourage people who are entrepreneurial that are on this call that you can look at models yourself from a company perspective as well within the legislation that are innovative. And I'll just share it in 1 minute, because Automatically recently published how they globally pay with an equal, transparent way. Now, I know it doesn't answer the question about tax, but it does show that innovation from their side, okay, what they can do.
Any other thoughts?
Can I interrupt a little bit?
Go ahead, Nelson.
Okay, thanks. I think it's part of the mindset problem too, from the companies, every government, public or private sector, because it's more than a cultural change, of course, but they doesn't consider that because we live now in new ways, right? New ways to live, new ways to work, and we are still thinking every day, every time. In I don't know how is up. What about our digital transformation processes? But we are losing something that we need to be prepared in the cultural way to achieve that in a good way, and I don't know, thinking about this for the future and to keep it going. And we are not ready for that, I think, in a lot of places, even in our mindset. So I think that is something we need to change and try to live in a transformational way. So with example, I think that is a point that we know we don't need to lose our watch for that, because it's very important.
All right, thanks a lot, Nelson. Any other thoughts? Sarah, you've been quiet the second part of the event. Any thoughts on your side?
I have been listening to everything, and it's been really interesting. No, I think they covered everything. it's super interesting because I'm as well doing the MBA, like you said before, and all these education issues of, you know, teaching in school that remote is not necessarily an option. It's something that came up a lot as well. I've been advocating for remote. Also knows.
Tara, do you wanna share the story about your MBA professor, which I think is mind blowing?
Yeah, so Nelson is an MBA colleague of mine, so he can help me with this one. And it's been really funny because, yeah, I started the MBA. I've been working remotely for about 5 years. I'm a designer, so I've been working from all over the world, but I've been in Spain for 1 year now. And I decided to join an MBA and like keep learning. So in that MBA, when we started doing classes and everything, when remote would come up, it would be in a very negative way. Like, you know, it's a trend, might not really happen. Like, this is just, yeah, it's not really an option, essentially. And what was really surprising to me as well was that all my colleagues in general were agreeing with that. So people that are really young as well, they were like, yeah, that's not for me. I want to see people. I want to interact with people. And if I don't have that, I don't feel like I'm getting value from working. So after seeing that for a bit, I ended up, going for my thesis on remote leadership and trying to prove them wrong. But yeah, it's been really interesting because, as you're saying, right, like maybe young people that have a degree and are more digital native would be more inclined to work like that. But up until now, at least the people that I have had around, it was not really the case, at least here in Alicante, where I am.
So that's a big issue. I don't know, Eva, if you want to add something to that, as you are also, Eva or Rowena, who are connected to the you know, institutions like the universities. But I don't see any MBAs before COVID. Obviously, I hope that after COVID that's going to change. In any programs, any, you know, leadership, high leadership, MBAs, or I don't know, management programs, talking about remote work. I don't know if that's the whole truth, or if it's already changing.
Well, our MBAs are fully online, so our students know that everything can be done online. But it's true that we don't do much above that. But of course, we wouldn't have that negative talk about remote work.
Yeah, I have a good anecdote, and I'm sorry if anyone has heard it before, because I teach a level 8 undergrad program in Dublin. I teach remotely. They're all human resources students, and they're learning about remote work. And the first cohort, the first group last year of the group of students, a percentage of them said, I don't want to work remote. I want to go to the office as a graduate because I want to make friends. I want to go out at the weekends. I want to go drinking at 5 o'clock with people that I meet in the office. So we have to recognize as well that some of them need that for their socialization, or they've always dreamed of having that first graduate job. But because they were HR students, they did say as well, but we need to know about this because the companies we work in might want to employ some remote people or may move to remote. So I think that's a different way of looking at it, that you need the awareness still. You might choose no, but what we want to do as advocates for the community is say, do you know enough about it to have a balanced argument with someone about it and talk about the pros and cons? Just because you don't want it doesn't mean it couldn't be good for someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Making it an option for people to really know that that is a possibility. As we're saying, there are a lot of unemployed people in Spain. And I think just knowing that that is an actual possibility would already be mind-blowing for a lot of people that are not even considering it for family reasons or whatever, staying here. And yeah, that's a great option.
That's super interesting, Rubén, that you bring this up, because another thing that we realized in the last couple of weeks, as some of you know, we have an association of co-working spaces here in the Canary Islands, and I was interested we have a student that came in to join us to help us, with some administrative tasks. She's doing still an undergraduate program, and And the first thing she said is that she really didn't know much about the possibility of that co-working spaces offer, the value that they offer, right? And this is another, connecting to what you were saying. I mean, people don't understand that if they are allowed to work remotely, they don't have to stay at home and work for themselves. They can go to a co-working space, find the same buddies that they can go get drunk without their boss knowing about it. So again, I mean, this is a transition that people will slowly probably understand, and it's just a change in the way that the human relationships are done. But definitely, that there's ways around it, right?
Yeah, but probably there's something generational, in the sense that not this generation is pro remote work and the other generation is against, but younger people have different needs in terms of socialization, learning the culture of the workplace, etc. And those needs will probably change just within some years. And that's probably, I don't know any research about this, but probably there are differences, and that depends on the age. And just, it's not, we don't have to force to work remotely people who maybe are interested in other kind of work.
But interestingly enough, Eva, connected to that, in our event in Paris, and I think Fabrizia mentioned Deal. The founder of Deal was part of the panel. And Deal, just so we have an idea now, just raised $14 million of funding. They solve basically compliance for companies hiring remote workers everywhere in the world. And he said, I've never worked in an office. I built my company remotely. I don't know what an office environment is. I don't need it. I'm never going to go to it. So we need to understand that this is also a reality. And we that have been in the office first and now understand, what remote is, have, the vision of both worlds. But there's already a generation that will never actually sit in an office. And that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other thoughts? Any other questions?
Nacho, just to add to that, right? When you think of that generation that haven't sat in the office, but if we, again, taking remote best practice, which has been mentioned a couple of times, and I'm sorry, looking at automatic GitLab GitHub, I know they're just some of the examples, but they do very intense offsite on retreats and team building, and they don't ignore the other skills that need to be built in person. There still could be gaps in leadership development. I'm not painting the ideal, but I do know from who I know in that community that they would meet regularly in person, that they would be doing these really quite forward-thinking in-person development workshops. So I guess there's also to comment that some of those trailblazers are aware of that it's not just sat at the computer, that you have to look at the other skills. So that they do look at that. And that's why Nomad City is so good, because we all get to meet in person.
Oh, thank you. I've heard the same. All right, guys. Well, I think we're almost close to the hour here. It's been super interesting conversation with you all. Sorry that we skipped again the networking side, but again, these events are flexible, and if the conversation keeps flowing, that's how we like it to be. I want to first thank Tamara for leading the panels and joining the conversation for the first time. And I obviously want to thank all the panelists for spending some time with us. Some of them already had to leave, and they wrote me some notes. I had other appointments later today. Thank you all for joining us and joining this conversation today. Our next event is gonna take place in Lisbon, Portugal, so very close by, on June 21st. So you'll hear about it very soon. And thank you again, and hope to get in touch with all of you soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you. Adios.
Bye.